All right, all right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give our praise, glory, and honor to Yahweh. Hashem Yahushai, Hashem Kakadash. Give honor to the apostle and elder, great millstone, and to the Akim across the globe, pushing the word of truth and sincerity. I want to say Shalom. 2 Thessalonians 3 and 10. For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any man, that if any will not work, neither should he eat. You know, this is uh, a topic, that the world sees, especially within our nation, within our people. And we're physically going out there and laboring and having the food and raiment, you know, shelter, food, and clothing, but you only get that by working through the work. And on the spiritual side, if you're not working in the truth, you're not going to reap the benefits of the fruit. We have to understand that you're going to get in, you're going to get out what you put in, and we have to keep our hand on the plow. We're husbandmen, man. We're sowers. So putting in this work, you know, and tilling the ground and watering and letting readying the land, preparing the land, all right, so there can be for fruit that you can eat in the end. And that's what we're hearing the truth, man. We're planting seed, we're taking care of our garden, we're making sure it's dressed properly, that we've done all that we can to reap the benefits of the harvest. And the benefits of our harvest, the fruits of our labor is salvation, man. Just like when you go to work, the fruits of your labor is your check. Therefore, with your check, you're able to pay your rent, you're able to pay your bills, buy the essentials, and what's left, possibly treat yourself, you know. But people, they think that you can just be a keyboard warrior. You could just go to church on a Sunday and, call on Jesus Christos, and you could do all the feeding the poor in your church, not the pork and the ham hocks downstairs in the basement, thinks you're doing the work of the Lord. But you're gonna see that the reward of that is gonna be destruction, man. So putting our hand to the plow, taking this work serious, constantly tending to the field, to the garden, taking heed into the doctrine, continuing these things, man. It's you're gonna yield the peaceable fruit. All right, you're gonna be eating of the fruit real soon, man. But if you're not working, if you're just focused on trying to rebuke the elders, trying to discredit the truth, trying to argue and debate everything, that's not doing the work. All right, trying to rightly dividing the word of truth, and this is not something that you can just do and look back and be like, okay, well, I've done 5 years, that's enough, I'm gonna get delivered. No, this is a race of endurance. He said, he that endureth to the end, the same shall be saved. And that's something that that people are confused about or misunderstood about. Scripture talk about growing old in thy work. And this is something that we have to continually do until the Lord returns. All right. Proverbs 20 and 4, it says, the sluggard will not plow by reason of the cold, therefore shall he beg and harvest and have nothing. The scriptures talk about how they shall say, Lord, Lord. He said, I do not know you. So you haven't done the work of the evangelist. You haven't done the work that the Lord commanded us to do. you know, and you expect to get paid when the Lord returns. There are going to be many people who are being deceived that think that because they haven't killed anybody, or because they haven't raped anybody, or because they haven't been mean to people, you're gonna get into the heaven, man. No, you know, there's a work that must be done. There's an obedience that must be had. There's suffering, and there's supplication, and there's um, prophesying. All right, storing up our treasures in heaven, man. So when the Lord does return, you know, we can humbly and confidently say that we've done all that we could. Also, he who runneth the race runneth all. You know, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to run. We're here to put all our effort into this work, so we won't be begging in harvest, man. When it's time to eat. You know, we gotta get this for ourselves. You know, you gotta plant and tend to your own field for yourself, for you to eat. You know, when it's cold outside, out on highways and byways, in the rain, in the snow, in the sleet. You know, without being super OR, you know, but the point being is that um, not letting anything stop you, man. You know, you're out here in the summertime, but in the wintertime, you're nowhere to be seen. You know, your pages are dry. You know, and this is just a record of your work, man. You know, you've done nothing to deserve the mercy of Yahweh Shemi Shai and getting on them chariots, man. Proverbs 10:4 says, he becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich, man. All right, we're not having a slack hand. All right, we're not here to get that word slack real quick. I'm just gonna get it, you know. Loose or relaxed, careless or slow, low or slow down. All right, it says yeah, so you know, to be loose and relaxed, something that is hanging loosely or lacking tension. Careless or slow, being negligent. See, if you're negligent in the work, if you're being lazy work or showing a lack of due diligence in his work, and it says the example given, e.g., that's what that means, the example given, slack work habits, man. So how are your work habits? Are your work habits um uh in are your work habits an indication of the work that you're putting in? You know, are you just half-assing it? You know, are you trying to just glide by and skate by without putting yourself out there and engulfing yourself and immersing yourself, all right, in the work of Yahweh Shemi Shai, man. You know, say, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich, man. You know, so you're out there, you're pulling up the weeds, you're making sure you're getting water, the proper sunlight. You know, you're giving it some extra nutrients, man. Maybe you need some extra phosphorus, all right? You need to aerate the earth. You need to put some worm catchers on there. What are we doing? You know, to ensure that our crop is going to be bountiful at the time of the reaping. Proverbs 19:15, slothfulness cast into a deep sleep, and an idle soul shall suffer hunger. You know, if we can't be lazy, man, we gotta be on fire in this truth. You know, we can't put off tomorrow. We got an old saying, why put off till tomorrow what you could do today? You know, we have to make ourselves, you know, to continue to push. You know, even when it's cold, even when you're tired, you know, even when your fingers hurt, even when your eyes are weary, even if you're having a bad day, you know, sleeping all day is a demon, man. You know, isolating yourself. You know, not doing what's required of you in the camps, man. You know, most of these camps have classes, where they in studies where they go over certain things, a topic that they might put out earlier that week, and you're supposed to have your notes ready. You got videos to watch, you got orders to watch. You know, and then when you get called on it, and you be like, "Well, I didn't read it," and you be like, "Why?" I was tired. I had to go to work. I had to take my child to the doctor, or whatever the case may be. Scripture talk about a wicked man finding an excuse according to his will, man. All right, get up and get out and get to work, man. A slothful man hideth his hand in his bosom, but not so much as bring it to his mouth again, man. And here it is, there's food out here to eat, and you're too lazy to eat it. You know, it's something that we have to be careful about. Guard ourselves about being lazy, being idle. All right. Yeah. Proverbs 26:13. The slothful man said, "There's a lion in the way. A lion is in the streets." And we'll get out the way. You know. Let me see what they mean by this. The latest person claims there's a lion on the road. Yes, I'm sure there's a lion out there. You know. It says, "As a door turns upon its hinges, so does the slothful upon his bed." All right, turning around, and being restless, loving sleep. You know. The sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason, man. You putting off and making excuses of why you can't do work. We got the brothers out here plowing and sowing. This should be motivation to you, man. See them labor and toil, and you start seeing the fruit, the vegetables coming out of the ground, and then a week later you start seeing the flowers and petals come upon there. You start seeing the actual fruit trying to grow, and now you're over here trying to catch up, play catch up, man. You know, get a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armored man, man. All that sleeping, all that resting. All right, that's not gonna get the job done, man. You gotta cut your grass after the rain. You just can't let it build up. You just can't continue to let the weeds grow. All right, we gotta tend to our field, man. We gotta tend to this work. All right, always sleepy, always tired. You know, before you know it, it's wintertime and you're hungry. Salvation time and you're begging and pleading for the Lord to save you when you see all these people dropping dead out here, man. Um, Slothfulness casteth into a deep sleep, and the idle soul shall suffer hunger, man. All right, we don't want to be hungry. We want to be full of the riches and the joy that comes with salvation, man. That's coming with salvation. Those things are going to be attained for putting in the work. All right, for tending to the field. The Lord tended to His best field. He watered His best garden. How much more us? You know. So with that one, say, call halal, Yahbashman outside. The Apostle and Elder Great Millstone. Till next time, Shalom. Baba Ball.